Henna, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. So glad we finally got to connect. I'm excited to have the conversation today.
Awesome. I'm so excited. We feel like we've been circling online and through mutual friends for months, years. So excited to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a brand new book coming out called Good Awkward: How to Embrace the Embarrassing and Celebrate the Cringe to Become the Bravest You. I've been doing this podcast for 5 years. We have yet to talk about what it means to be awkward. Yet when you hear the word cringe, you can't help but cringe a little bit and remember a moment in your life where you had that cringe moment. I got to ask first, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the book, I'm sure there had to have been something in your life that catapulted the awkwardness book and being an expert at awkwardness. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, I wish, God, wouldn't it be nice if it was like one something? It was my whole age, birth to 17. I mean, does that count? Yeah, I always felt awkward. I think it's funny. People who meet me now and know me now, they're like, "Oh, you're so, you're well spoken, you're confident, all these things." I'm like, yeah, that's funny to me because I was never shy. And I think one of the things that we can talk about later is it's not just for introverts or shy people. I was always extroverted, but I always felt impossibly awkward. I always felt like my bumpy edges were on display. When everybody else was, eating certain things in their lunchbox, I had really aromatic Pakistani food. When my friends were all named Jennifer and Samantha, kid of the 80s, I was Henna at the time, like Hanna-Barbera was a big thing. Just everything was always slightly off kilter in my world. And all I wanted to do was fit in. And awkwardness is a social emotion. It's something that we feel in the presence of others. If we, say the wrong thing or, kind of screw something up and nobody's there to see it, we don't typically feel awkward. But when it happens in front of other people as a social emotion, we feel it. And it just felt like my whole life up until high school, it was one awkward moment after another. I never quite got my bearings. And it wasn't until college, I think I started to, feel a little more comfortable in my own skin, found my people. And then professionally, and I'll kind of end with this, every time I hit a new growth point, an inflection point, all of a sudden little kid Henna feelings all popped back up again, right? People are looking at me funny. I was saying the wrong thing. This is not what I was supposed to say right now. Oh my gosh, I look like an idiot. All those awkward feelings came back. And what I started to learn was that at every inflection point of our career, we are increasing and inviting not just uncertainty, not just discomfort, but awkwardness specifically. And no one had done a deep dive into that specific emotion and the role that it plays in the workplace.
It sounds like this book has been in the making for perhaps decades.
I think so. And, I'll just say that quickly, Brene Brown, who a lot of us love and admire in our field, she also used to end her podcast with "Stay awkward, brave, and kind." That was her tagline: stay awkward, brave, and kind. And, I myself and others would say to me, brave, kind. Yeah, my parents taught me that one. Stay awkward. Do I have to? Like, I don't want to. Right. And so that to me was also another point of curiosity. How do you stay awkward when every part of you wants to fight that feeling off with a stick?
I love that. So I think the first thing to set the table is I like to identify the myths and the misconceptions. So where I'd like to start, Henna, first is, what is awkward? What isn't awkward? And then we'll go into why is an advantage. But first, what the heck is awkward? How do you define it? Is there a definition? What does that look like?
Yeah, there's actually tons of definitions. So I'll kind of share what they have in common. First thing is that's important to understand is awkwardness is a social emotion and it's subjective. Meaning, when we are using that word to describe a person, there's no such thing as objectively awkward, right? So you are not objectively awkward. People who call themselves, "I'm socially awkward," they're not objectively awkward. It's a subjective thing, meaning it's an opinion. It is up to us to deem them so, or it's up to us to deem ourselves so. There's no such thing as an objectively awkward person. So it is a subjective emotion. It's up to us to decide it. Also, it's something that typically when we're using it in the sphere of personal and professional development language, it speaks to this emotion we feel when we're between two selves. So there's the person we believe ourselves to be, and for a moment, it's at odds with this person who other people see on display. So, okay, I'm at work. I have this great idea. I raise my hand in a meeting. I'm like, "This is gonna be awesome. They're gonna love it." And the manager is like, "No," moves on, right? And you're like, "Oh my God, I'm flushed with embarrassment. My face is red. This is terrible," because I believe myself someone to be smart at work, who has good ideas, who makes a contribution. And in that moment, everybody in that meeting is like, "That girl doesn't know what she's talking about." Awkward, right? Uncertainty, unexpected, wasn't what we expect. So this emotion exists when we have these two selves that start to separate. And now we have to live in this gap space in between.
What do you think most people get wrong about awkwardness? What do they get wrong, or what do they say wrong about it?
Yeah, the a couple things. First is if I still feel this awkward all the time, then there's something wrong with me, right? I haven't achieved the confidence that I should have by now. Or maybe, the awkwardness is a sign that I don't belong in this room, right? I'm not expert enough. I don't understand enough. The truth is, awkwardness is a universal emotion. The most confident leaders, the most confident athletes, every top performer you've ever met experiences awkwardness. Awkwardness lives in uncertainty. It's when something goes away that we didn't expect it to. So unless you have that magic wand to eliminate all uncertainty in your life, good luck with eliminating awkwardness. It is universal. Most people think, okay, I can work my way out of it. No, you can't, right? And the other thing people don't quite realize is the most confident people they know experience awkwardness either at the same level or potentially even more, because they've just learned to embrace it. So they actually put themselves in situations that invites even more of it into their lives. They've just done the mental work to get comfortable living in that space once they hit it. But the most confident people, they actually chase situations that invite that feeling into their lives. So it's very counterintuitive, but most people don't think of awkward and confident as living on the same spectrum. I think they're completely related, and in fact, sisters in this work of personal professional growth.
Wow, interesting. I love that. So I want to go back to Brene Brown. So she says she signs off with "stay awkward." And one of the things we love about Brene is she's really popularized the idea of being vulnerable, and people really gravitate towards being vulnerable. Henna, what's your thoughts on vulnerability and awkwardness? How do they relate? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, great question. We talk about it in the book. There's a whole section where we talk about the difference between the two. So they're not completely unrelated. There's overlap characteristics, but the big difference between the two is vulnerability is higher on the scale of emotional exposure. So you're a little bit higher on the scale of emotional exposure, a little bit more of your emotions come into the conversation. Awkwardness is a few steps before. It still is in that space of uncertainty. It's still in that space of a little bit of disclosure, but you're not going full in on the emotional exposure. What I assert, and I believe this to be true because I've seen this 1,000 times, is there are too many leaders, high performers who have been hearing loud and clear, again, love me some Queen Brene, about the benefits of being vulnerable at work or in their social circles. Not everyone is there yet, though. Not everyone is there yet. And so what we see is either people not being vulnerable at all, or the more dangerous one, what I call in the book faux vulnerability, like faux vulnerability, right? They're, oh, this is really hard for me. And you're like, no, it's not, right? we can see that it's not. And so these folks have to be able to start to think about, how can I back this up one step? Awkwardness is one step back. Can you embrace that sticky, imperfect, I didn't quite get it right, woo, I just really said the wrong thing? Can we stay in that space first? Get comfortable there. If you can get comfortable in your awkwardness, then inviting vulnerability in the future, true vulnerability, is within closer reach. But we can't jump from, not being in that place at all to true, authentic vulnerability. It's too much of a step. We got to get comfortable in that messy, awkward middle first.
Comfortable in the messy and awkward middle first. Okay, so what are the steps? I know you love action just as much as I do. We can talk about it, but action is what makes the difference. What are the action items for the listeners out there that are like, holy crap, I am awkward. I self-identify as awkward. Where do they start? What are some little steps?
Yeah, first of all, I love the way you framed this question, because I think that's an important first step, right? So when you think about this word awkward, do you use that word as a state or a trait? So is it a state? I feel awkward right now. I just had an awkward conversation. Boy, that was an awkward presentation. That's a state. That's transient. It passes. It's over. Or do you use that word as a trait? God, I am so awkward. I am so socially awkward. That leader is just so awkward, right? If you are using it as a trait, which again, remember, it's subjective. No one is objectively awkward. That is identity limiting language, right? You have painted yourself as a certain type of person. It's an identity. Can you first reframe your language? Can you rewrite your internal narrative to say, I am not an awkward person. I just feel awkward right now. Or I tend to feel awkward in these types of moments, in these types of situations. So start with that, right? Recalibrate your language. Second thing is, we need to have that awareness. We need to peel back the layers. Awkwardness tends to come from a desire for approval, right? It's a social emotion. We're humans wired for belonging. And so often people who feel high levels of awkwardness have a stronger bend towards caring what other people think, right? So it's having a deeper understanding, doing that reflection work around approval. And the other little fun kind of surprise barometer that I like to give people, we do a little quiz in the book, is there's a phenomenon called vicarious embarrassment. This is actually a really cool test for you to calibrate on your own awkwardness levels. Are you someone who tends to feel embarrassed for other people? right? So somebody else messes up their work presentation. Somebody else trips on the sidewalk while you're walking down the street. Do you feel flush with a full body? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened to them, right? My daughter is 13. She is full of vicarious embarrassment right now, right? She'll watch somebody doing something and she's, oh my God, mom, you see what they're doing? Like, it's as though it's happening to her. And this is actually corroborated by science. Your brain feels social pain for other people just as strongly as it can feel physical pain. It happens in the same part of the brain center. And what's interesting about this is that vicarious embarrassment is actually a function of a certain type of empathy. So some of us who are very high on a certain type of empathy will take on that feelings of awkwardness and embarrassment for other people. The reason I bring this up is because if we're trying to examine our own relationship with awkwardness, it's useful to know how high that is, because if it's high over there, it makes us feel like everyone is looking at us much more acutely than they are. So some of the early steps, and we can talk about more, is just that level of awareness calibration around how awkwardness shows up in our own lives.
I love it. This is great. The second, I want to dive a little bit deeper into each of them. So the first one was, excuse me, approval. And you talked about the spotlight effect on page 79. I thought this was so interesting and humbling. For the listeners that don't know what the spotlight effect is, I think this is a great time to dive into that. Can you teach us what that is?
Yeah, the spotlight effect was a term coined by Tom Gilovich out of Cornell. He's a psychologist at Cornell. And the simplest definition for it is we think people are paying much closer attention to us than they actually are, right? We think everyone saw that. Everyone is watching. I'm shaking giving this presentation. Everyone is staring at my hands. No, honestly, they're probably staring at their own hands and occasionally looking up at you, right? Honestly, they're probably wondering if they're breathing too loud or smacking their gum. No one, rarely, and I don't like to speak in absolutes, I'm always very careful, but no one is paying as much attention to us as we think they are. They are more concerned about whether they look awkward, about whether other people approve of them. And so really anchoring into that understanding, this isn't, we believe this is true. This is backed by science and data. People are not paying as close attention to your blunders, your mistakes, your missteps, as close as they think you are. Even if they noticed it, they're not lingering on it the way you do in the shower for the hour that happened afterwards. I'm still thinking about, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. Guess what? Everyone else is already over it, right? And so the spotlight effect is just an important baseline understanding of what people are actually paying attention to, which is far lower than we think.
What I love about your book is you back it up with a lot of science and experiments and studies. You had a really cool one on the spotlight effect with somebody wearing a t-shirt that had something unique on it. Can you paint that picture?
Yeah.
I think it tells a great
Yeah.
story and it kind of illuminates what this spotlight effect really is.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like it's a generationally interesting choice,
Yeah,
but they had a
true.
bunch of students wear what they thought would be an awkward, embarrassing t-shirt, which at the time their selection was a Barry Manilow t-shirt. And the study was essentially who's paying attention to this and mocking them, kind of validating this embarrassment. And the results were, it was something like 10%, right? Like 10% of people actually paid any darn attention to what was on this shirt, where the people wearing the shirt anticipated it was going to be exponential multiples of that. And so this was just one, and they repeated the study with other various characters, other t-shirts they deemed embarrassing. Poor Barry Manilow. He didn't mean to be the embarrassing t-shirt, but he was. This was repeated in numerous different types of studies, and it was really just meant to point to the fact that here they had this, it was his face huge on a t-shirt. Everyone's going to notice. Everyone's going to see this and think this is who I like in music. So few people are paying attention. And even of those 10%, it was like a blip on the radar and then it was over. So just over and over, the data points to the fact that even if you think you have this thing that's on massive display, it's either not considered with the intensity that we think, or if it is, by those very select few, it's forgotten very quickly. And so we just have to keep in mind that this is human wiring. We are just more concerned with ourselves. It's our self-preservation that kicks in. No one is giving you this much energy and attention.
And sometimes I think the awkwardness lies in our own minds. I've had some people come up to me, Henna, at some points in my life and be like, oh my gosh, that was so awkward after we walk away from something. I was like, I didn't think it was awkward. So
Right.
how much of awkwardness just plays? I mean, this is a mindset podcast. How much of mindset is between your own ears? I'm thinking about the spotlight effect. You're thinking everybody's looking at you, so that's one avenue. But how much is awkwardness like it's between your ears? Nobody
Yeah.
else is thinking this is awkward, just
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, awkwardness is 100% a mindset shift exercise, because what ultimately happens is, again, we started to talk about the fact that awkwardness comes from uncertainty.
Mhm.
So there's a few different moments where you might feel it. I think of it as two buckets. There's life's unplanned moments, I'm walking through the mall. I hit my shoulder on the rack. I'm walking down the street. I trip over my own 2 feet. We're not planning on those moments. Those are just life's natural, unplanned, awkward moments. But then we invite them in life's planned moments, right? I'm going to raise my hand and say this thing in this meeting, not knowing how it's going to land. I'm going to have this difficult conversation. Might not feel that great, might be awkward, right? These are planned moments where awkwardness might be an expectation. What they have in common is uncertainty. And what the uncertainty speaks to, and this is where the mindset comes in, is we tend to experience the uncertainty of awkwardness because mentally, whether it's subconscious or conscious, we have an expectation of how that interaction is going to go. So again, in the unplanned moments, we're not really thinking, am I going to trip over the sidewalk? Those we just have to calibrate, and usually we can adjust depending on the severity. In life's planned moments, I decided to be courageous. I raised my hand. I gave this contribution. It did not land. Silence. Nobody laughed. Nobody did this thing, right? We didn't go how I thought it was going to. I feel awkward. And it has to do with where our mind was regarding the expectation. The expectation was it was going to go a certain way, and it didn't. And so the mindset works come in with, how do we precondition our minds for expectations that don't go our way, right? Are we overly attached to outcome? Are we overly attached to the agenda that we have set in our minds? Or are we going into a moment, especially a planned one, with the understanding that, hey, this could go the way I think it might, or it could not, right? And often the mindset conditioning we can do, not necessarily, again, we can't predict. We don't have the uncertainty meter. I don't have the crystal ball. But what we can do instead is prep our mental muscles for more of those uncertain moments. We've gotten away from so many of these exercises that prime our brains for uncertain moments. So things like role play exercises, things like improv exercises, right? There are things we can do to prime our social muscles to be more ready for uncertainty and different outcomes. We've gotten away from it. And so we just don't even have the muscle to respond to these things appropriately. Our expectations don't get met. And we sit there and ruminate about how we got it wrong rather than taking action towards fixing it.
I got a chance to interview our mutual friend Travis Thomas, and we talked all about improv, and it was so dang fun. And now I use that as part of my teaching and keynote speaking because it's a great. I haven't even thought about it the way you just said it, Henna, but it is a great way to practice the skill of uncertainty. I mean, and you talk about it in your book. Maybe that now is a good time. Why talk to me about improv? We both know Travis. What are your thoughts on improv being a way to boost up your awkwardness?
I know I didn't send you the book until recently, so you're probably still making your way through, but the chapter towards the end actually have a great bunch of lines from Travis, who I interviewed for that section. I have only taken improv training a couple times. I intend to actually continue to do it more, but it was transformative on my life because improv training has this unique ability to capture an experience, which is, again, a social experience. Awkwardness is a social emotion, essentially creates an environment where you have a chance to practice social muscles. So, improv is different than stand-up. People think comedy, improv comedy, stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy is rehearsed, premeditated, haha, with like a little bit of ad-libbing. Improv, there is no script. There is no rehearsal. For those who are not familiar, improvisational comedy or improv is essentially a modality that is built on the fact that a topic is thrown out there and people are just vibing on a dime, right? You threw this at me. Now I'm going to take it. I'm going to throw something right back. Oh, that wasn't what I expected. Okay, we're going to go with it. I'm going to throw it over here. It's about what we just talked about before, not having expectations of what the other person is going to say. And in fact, the most successful improv is when the expectations are purposely subverted, right? They're not actually going to say the thing that you expect them to say. They give it a twist, and now you have to take that and respond to it. And so when we think about how do we practice building the muscle of adjusting our expectations, improv gives you numerous opportunities, even if you do it in a work setting, which lots of companies now are, lots of opportunities to practice what it feels like to say something, expect a certain response or a certain reaction, and have it go another way. It's just a really instant, effective way to train those mental muscles.
One of the coolest parts about your book is that you frame it as awkwardness is an advantage, right? If we look at it a certain way, it can actually be an advantage. You talk about the ick moment, ICC. Improvement comes after cringe. I think this fits well with the mindset piece too, of like, it depends how you frame it. The story you tell yourself, sometimes the hardest moments in our life turn out, if you have enough patience, turn out to be the most life-changing and pivotal and best moments of our life, if you can frame the story. Talk to me about, that's such a huge part of awkwardness, how you view it, the improvement that comes after it, and the stories you tell yourself. I'll let you just kind of take it from there.
Yeah. So the stories we tell ourselves are 99% of this early battle, right? So the book is kind of split into three parts. There's the foundational, what is awkwardness? We talk about the awareness of the emotion. If we don't really understand how it operates inside of us and the role that it plays, it's hard to then apply tools, and then tools we can use to condition the muscles, right? So ick moments, improvement comes after cringe. This really speaks to this idea that many of us, when we want to take a risk at work, in our personal lives, in our social circles, we find ourselves standing at the edge of this chasm, right? So over here, this is what I know. This is where certainty is. This is where guaranteed, or at least some version of close to guaranteed approval lives. People know that I can do XYZ. They approve of these decisions. Now here, I want to take this risk. I want to go try something. I want to raise my hand in this meeting. I want to negotiate for more money. And there's a little chasm that we have to jump over to that kind of next place we want to go. I call it the improvement side, right? There's a little bit of that jump. We got to put in a little bit of that mental muscle. Now, in those moments, that gap, that's uncertainty. We don't know how it's going to go. We don't know how the people are going to receive it. And so when we start thinking about the stories we tell ourselves, inevitably, let's assume we find a little bit of that muscle and we jump, right? We're thinking about jumping or we jump. Let's say it didn't go the way we wanted it to. Okay, possible. Maybe we had an expectation, it wasn't met, we jumped, but it didn't go the way we thought. There's two stories we can tell ourselves. This is out of Northwestern, Dan McAdams. He refers to them as contamination stories, which is, oh my God, I tried to negotiate my salary. The guy told me I wasn't worth it. They didn't have the budget. I didn't have enough skills. I'm never going to do that again. That's a contamination story. You tried something and you contaminated your future attempts because of what you believe that represented. Essentially, it's going to create inaction the next time because you've decided it wasn't worth it. Your brain took that pollution and is now assigning it to the rest of your life. Or the alternative is, and again, this takes intention, is to tell yourself a redemptive story, which is hunting the good. What was the learning? Can you reframe it? Okay, I didn't get what I wanted. I wasn't really thrilled with how that went, but I don't normally raise my hand and speak up for that kind of thing. I don't normally try to negotiate my salaries. So I'm really going to celebrate the fact that I did. I survived it. I didn't get what I wanted, but they don't think less of me for it. In fact, maybe the boss gives you some props that you at least brought it up and tried. But can you look for the gifts in the garbage, right? It didn't feel that good in that moment, but can you look for those gifts in the garbage? Because if you can, and if you can find even a few, that story will feed very differently into the next time you try something, and you will not get stuck at the edge of the cringe chasm. You'll jump again. And all that improvement, everything on the other side, it comes after the cringe. The cringe is part of it. It's not, maybe you'll get to do this without, it's part of it. And so we start to celebrate that as part of the process.
Just read a cool article about the different types of luck out there, Henna. And basically, there's this cool study about people that consider themselves lucky and unlucky. And they interviewed these people that find themselves to be lucky individuals. Good things just tend to happen to them. And the commonality between these 200 people was that they all agreed that they constantly go out of their way to meet new people. And when they're at dinner parties, they constantly have conversations and they put themselves out there. And I just can't help but bring that up when you say something like putting yourself out there. I always like to say that if you want a chance, you have to take a chance. And that's what this comes down to. If you want to improve awkwardness, you want to improve your confidence, if you want to get lucky and have these things, you got to be able to take the chance. That's got to be such a huge part of awkwardness, is you got to just put your foot out there. You got to raise your hand.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard expressions like yes lives in the land of no, right? Confidence lives in the land of awkwardness. Courage, risk-taking lives in the land of awkwardness, because again, with uncertainty being directly tied to it, the more times you go to bat, the more times you put yourself out there, the more times you make the awkward ask, the more times you're going to cringe, the more times you're going to go, oh God, I don't want to do this. Oh God, this is weird. Oh God, they're going to think I'm an idiot. But guess what? Yeah, luck is a volume game. Luck is scanning the environment for how wide you can spread your net. I've been very lucky this year. I've had more awkward conversations than I can count. I've had more awkward rejections than I can count, right? The volume game is so much a part of this. So you're 100% right, DJ. It's a numbers game, but part of the numbers is not just pure tally marks. It's, are you willing to accept that emotion and not internalize it, right? So every time I've had an awkward ask go wrong, which have been many, what story am I telling myself? Am I telling myself, okay, this is like 3 no's in a row. I'm done. I'm gonna take a break. Or am I gonna say, you know what? Good for you. You did the 3, you tried it. Those were people you never would have tried to reach out to 2 years ago. So that's huge. The fact that you even asked. Let's try 3 more next week, right? But it is a numbers game when it comes to this. Part of what I couldn't agree with you more on is the reps, the same way physical reps, you're in the physical gym, we use this in the mindset world all the time, right? The mind gym, the mental gym. We talk a lot about mental reps. This is mental reps in a social sphere. Mental reps are great to have at home. There's lots of, and I know many of your previous guests, you talk about all the different mindset things we can do on our own time, all the mental reps. Part of being effective in this modern workplace where automation is increasingly, removing the friction of all these little logistical things, there's now going to be a premium on people that are excellent in social environments. Humans are going to human. We cannot engineer social muscle out of the interactions that we're going to have. And there's increasingly a number of people who are losing that social muscle because they are hiding behind screens. They're only having conversations via text. They're swiping because they don't want to talk to somebody, right? Our social muscle is starting to weaken. It's starting to atrophy. So the same way in your previous episodes, you've had guests talk about putting in mental reps. Please, on the social side, mindset for social situations involves mental reps that look very different, specifically as it relates to social. You got to put in those reps as it relates to other people and the chances that it could be awkward.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head a lot here because I'm glad you went here, and this is where I want to go next. So I think a lot of people, they find themselves awkward when it's small talk or they're at a dinner party, and that you have had some conversation or you've had some parts in your book on this, and that's when I feel people feel the most awkward because they don't know what to talk about, or they don't know. Another one that's kind of funny that gets brought up is like, I don't know how to end a conversation. Like, we're kind of done talking, and I don't know, can I just walk away? How do I end the conversation without being awkward? So I'm curious, what's the advice, Henna, for people that the social awkwardness that we have getting in the reps, but are there any other cues or simple things that are like, hey, this works really well for people when it comes to being at a dinner party?
Yeah, a couple different strategies. First, I'll give you my 2 favorites. First of all, we deeply underestimate how powerful and helpful it is just to name awkwardness. It seems obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. If they feel it, they're like, I'm just going to shrink back. I'm not going to say anything. It is so disarming and relatable for that first person. And we've all been in this situation, for that first person to speak into the room. God, networking events are so awkward, aren't they? Right? All it takes is one person to say it and everyone's like, yes, gosh, it's like so much small talk, right? So just naming it, God, we don't know anybody here. This is awkward. Hey, I've never met you before and I don't even know what to ask. Feeling kind of awkward about it right now, right? Just naming it, immediately you'll see people's shoulders drop, the tension diffuses, and immediately creates this little moment of trust and relationship satisfaction because it's naming the thing that everyone's feeling that's in the room. Even those of us that don't feel it as acutely in those situations still have a degree of it, right? So it's disarming to name it. The other strategy is use a little bit of humor. And if you're not somebody who considers yourself naturally funny, you can have some talk tracks that you have in the bank for those situations that you have on the ready. So I'll give you an example. One of the interviews for my book, there's a girl named Satya. She hates doing networking events, and her line, because she knew people in her company were getting ahead because of how well networked they were, she wasn't. So she's like, I need to do more of this networking, even though I feel so awkward. I feel so socially out of place. So she had a line. She would walk up to a stranger and said, listen, my sister said she would give me, or we have a bet for $20 if I talk to 2 new people today, and I really don't want to lose $20. Will you be one of them? Right? It's funny, it's playful, it's disarming. In that conversation, she met this guy, Ben, who ended up being this huge collaborator with her on future projects. But had she not done that, had she not found a little talk track that she could put in her pocket and take with her, she would have never found that just kind of innate courage. So it's have some prep stuff, have a little anecdote, a little humor bit. But these are some things you can do in the real moment in time to diffuse awkwardness, to have it kind of not have the hold on you that stops you from doing what you need to do.
I love it. In your book, you said, being comfortable with our imperfect selves is the first step towards embracing awkwardness and making it your superpower. Start by being willing to tell your team and colleagues things like this. I screwed that up. I'm not sure what to say right now. I'm working on it. I don't quite know what I'm doing here, but I'm learning as I go. I'm not sure how to proceed from here. And this is uncomfortable, isn't it? So I think that kind of lies in with what we're talking about, putting it out there, having some of these phrases. And more times than not, I think what's going to happen, I think what you're saying, Henna, is that the counterpart's going to say, oh my God, yeah, I agree. I'm with you. And you kind of have this bonding moment.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, people sometimes are fearful of these phrases. And I just want to name this in case anyone listening hears this and says, I can't say that stuff at work, right? Then it's going to make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. Awkwardness is not the same as ineptitude. And I think this is a really important distinction. I use the metaphor in the book. I wouldn't want to hire an inept anesthesiologist, but I'd be perfectly fine hiring an awkward one, right? So this is not about saying, I have no idea what I'm talking about. You have to have some level of previous competence, but using these phrases when you generally are perceived as someone who's smart and can figure things out, maybe not when you're brand new at your first job, but when you're generally seen as someone with a little bit of credibility behind you, using these phrases actually makes you appear to your peers and your teams as more confident. You are not, someone who has the BS meter on all the time. You're willing to own it. You're willing to say, I have no idea what the right thing is to say here, but I'm going to figure that out and get back to you. Believe it or not, the counterintuitive truth is that does not make you look inept. That makes you look more confident. So if that is a place where you've earned the ability to have a little bit of that street cred behind you and you can use a phrase like that, it is powerful in your trust, in your relationship. People actually, there's research that says when you use phrases like that, you look more trustworthy, more kind, more generative, meaning that people think you're someone who can actually come up with interesting ideas. There's all this data that shows the benefits of actually admitting these things. And yet the counterintuitive truth is we're afraid to because of how we think it will look to other people.
Interesting. So I think we've done a really good job, Henna, talking about, okay, what do you do before an awkward situation? What do you do during? Now I'm curious on what you do after. And I'm pulling up a spot. If you can just hold on for 1 second. I like this spot in your book, and I wanted to read it out loud if you don't mind.
It's fine. I love that you have it in front of you. So
yes.
Hey, listeners, let's have an awkward silence, all of us.
Perfect. Let's put it into play. Let's see. Yes, right here. All right. So I'm going to assume that since you're the type of person who reads books, you're smart, you're capable, you're a competent person. The pratfall effect states that people who are perceived as highly competent are found to be more likable when they perform an everyday blunder than those who don't. That's right. You spilling coffee all over yourself makes you more likable. How is that? The pratfall effect kicks in because super smart, ultra competent people are often viewed by others as superhuman, a little intimidating and hard to relate to. So a small mistake can actually humanize them for a moment and therefore get them to like them more. And this is the story that I wanted to share. When Lady Gaga performed at the 53rd annual Grammy Awards, she suffered a wardrobe malfunction when her left shoe fell off. Well, while it wasn't a Janet Jackson halftime show level of malfunction, it was unplanned and embarrassing nonetheless. But she continued to dance enthusiastically and sing her heart out despite her missing shoe. Instead of letting the awkward moment get to her, Gaga leaned into it and made it part of the performance, and the audience loved it. News outlets applauded her ability to stay in the moment and reported that the bold, imperfect action and humor made her performance even more memorable. Gaga's willingness to embrace the embarrassing moment had a massive, positive trickle-down effect. In addition to showing her humanity, it displayed her professionalism and her ability to improvise. Her performance became one of the highlights of the Grammy Awards that year, and her fans adored her even more for it. This is the pratfall effect. Talk to me about the pratfall effect.
I love the pratfall effect because if anything, it is a huge, colorful permission slip for all of us to just relax a little bit. And so, okay, let me quickly give the distinction of who the pratfall effect does not apply to. So if you are in the workplace and you have not built up any street cred, right? You're brand new. There's not really any implicit trust in your abilities yet. I do not suggest that you purposely dump a cup of coffee on your lap, right? This is not what this implies. What the pratfall effect does say is if you generally, again, have some street cred to your name, you're generally someone who people would look at and say, DJ's pretty competent. He knows what he's talking about. I've seen what he's done. And you goof up, you make a mistake, you spill something. It actually has the effect of making you relatable, of making you human. And so my opening story in the book is about Jennifer Lawrence, right? Jennifer Lawrence, the actress, who has, by all means, everything going for her. This woman is beautiful. She has Oscars. She has one of the highest paychecks of female actresses in the industry. She's, every award under the sun, this woman has won. She's funny. She's smart. She's clever. Most of us should hate her. That's what social science tells us. We're like, God, why is she so damn perfect? It's so annoying, right? Most of us should hate her, but we don't, because she trips over her fancy dress at the Oscars. When she starts laughing really hard, she snorts. You know, there's a story that's on the cutting room floor of the book where she talked about how she misidentified, you know, another celebrity at a party and started talking to them like they were somebody else, right? And when you hear stories like that, you're like, I do that, right? I do that stuff. That's the same dumb stuff that I do all the time. And so rather than us feeling embarrassed for her, we're like, oh, thank God she's human. Oh, thank God. That actually makes me like her more. She's more relatable. So the simple way to describe the pratfall effect is when we make these little mistakes, obviously not catastrophic, but little blunders, little mistakes, little missteps, it actually helps knock people off the pedestal that we put them on, which makes it very hard to relate to them, makes it very hard for us to feel like we're in the same camp as them, and humanizes them again, makes them likable, relatable. There's another story in the book, specifically in the business context. I was working with a leader who she works for a large telecom company. And when everything went to Zoom very, very quickly at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, she would say, Henna, our CEO is this very business guy, very business, right? It's buttoned up, doesn't really smile, doesn't really laugh, right? Probably wears a suit to bed. This guy is, you know, very, very vanilla. And the pandemic happened. Everyone got thrown into Zoom. Nobody had time to curate their background. It was just like, oh, kitchen table, let's go. He had to throw an all hands meeting. And in this meeting, she said he had on his suit. He was trying, right, to kind of keep his airs up. But then the daughter starts pulling on the sleeve and the dog starts barking and he didn't know how to mute, right? He's fumbling. He's like, oh my God. She said, we loved it. We loved it because all of a sudden, like, oh my God, he's human. He's human like us. It made him more relatable. It made him more likable. His ratings actually went up from the entire executive leadership team. So he learned from that experience and was like, you know what? I'm going to stop trying to put on this air of superhuman leader. And he's now since relaxed in meetings. He's a little more conversational. He doesn't mind if he messes up. There's such a lesson. The pandemic sucked for 1,000 reasons, but the one big lesson that came from it, and I hope we don't squander it, is imperfections. We all saw each other's because we all got thrown into this real quick. Let's keep that going, right? It helps. It makes us relatable. It makes us more likable. We're just better social creatures and work together better when we let that side show.
Yeah, let's normalize awkwardness. I think that's why I sent you
Yes.
that text message the other day of like hashtag stay awkward because it's you know
Yes.
you totally frame it. You totally think of it like when I first looked at the cover, I'm like awkward, like oh gosh. But now it's like
Yeah.
own it, sit in it, love
Yeah.
it because you know what the truth is, Hannah, life is freaking short, and some of this stuff
Yeah.
is gonna happen. And if you can just joke it off, you're gonna have a more enjoyable time on this earth. But if you cringe and you think about oh my gosh, 3 years ago I said this and I'm still thinking about it, that's gonna
Yeah.
not only shorten your life, but it's gonna give you more stress and it's just there's two different
Yeah.
ways you can go about it. And guys, life is just too short for that.
Yeah. Can I give you one more fun example that
Please
happened to
do.
me recently? I had my first so my book comes out September 26th, and about a month or two ago, I went to the US Book Show, which is one of the biggest, you know, kind of publishers, literary agents shows in the country. It was in New York City. I felt awkward. I felt very awkward. There's certain rooms that I feel like I kind of belong in. That is not one of them, right? I am a first time author. I've never done this. These literary agents have, you know, been working with like the top people in our mindset sphere for years, the top players, the publishers, or, you know, it's the CEO of Barnes and Noble was sitting like three rows down, the head of Blackstone Publishing, the head of Penguin House, right? They're all here. I end up meeting the head of Blackstone Publishing, which is a very, you know, premier traditional publisher. And we strike up a conversation and he says something about, you know, is your book on the EPUB hub? Or I don't even remember exactly how he said it. And I literally remember going, I looked at the guy, I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I have no idea what those words mean. I'm sorry. I was gonna try to BS you right now, but I'm a first time author, and I truly, this is like I'm feeling a bit like a fish out of water being in this
Mhm.
room using terminology that I've never heard before. Can you just explain to me what that is? And he laughed, right? But I owned that awkwardness. Like I could have sat there and BS'd it, but I just, you know, I smiled and I said, well, you know, it's kind of awkward, but I have no idea what these words are that you're saying. Do you mind explaining it to me? He was so kind. He's like, thank you for owning. This is what he said. He said, thank you for owning that. Here's what it is and what I mean. And we had a bonding moment over it, right? We had a bonding. It was a real moment. So I could have let that experience, you know, eat me up. I could have gone into the hallway going, oh my God, Blackstone publisher founder. And I just sat there and made myself look like an idiot. I had no idea. I should have done more homework. I should have done more research. all of those things absolutely in one period of my life would have gone through my mind, right? But having now done this work, having lived this kind of ethos myself, I'm like, human's gonna human. I don't know what he's talking about. I can make light of it. I can make a bonding moment out of it. And it worked. It did. We had a great conversation after that.
Would I be correct in saying that awkwardness rises when you start to become somebody that you're not? Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, there's a lot of relationship between awkwardness and self-doubt, right? Awkwardness and imposter thoughts. So in that moment, I'm still, and in this, let's be honest here, in this moment, I'm still wrestling with imposter thoughts about being an author, right? And the level of author that I would like to be in, the rooms that I would like to be in. So yes, every inflection point in our career, I use that term in the book a lot, transition points, inflection points, anytime we're going into a room that feels a little bigger than we feel necessarily ready to be in, that is going to invite imposter thoughts, awkwardness, self-doubt. The difference becomes, when you have healthy self-doubt, I feel a little bit awkward, but this self-doubt is the self-doubt is healthy. Healthy self-doubt motivates us to prepare a little bit more. It tells us to do just a little bit more research, helps us kind of think about things a little bit differently. Healthy self-doubt is fine. A lot of times, especially women in the mindset space come to me and like, oh, I feel so much self-doubt. And I'm like, I'm not going to get it out of you. Self-doubt is good if it's healthy. Unhealthy self-doubt is it freezes you, right? It paralyzes you from taking the next step. I'm not going to put myself into that room this time. I'm not going to put myself into that room the next time. That's unhealthy self-doubt. When we can embrace awkwardness, we are sitting in that place of healthy self-doubt. And it is often when we're playing a little bit bigger or we're trying to move towards someone that we don't feel like we are yet, but that's okay. That's healthy. That's how we should feel. If we normalize the expectation of that's how we should feel and start to work on the reflection tools and some of the conditioning tools, then it'll be easier the next time. But that should be the expectation and not a surprise.
Right. One more quote I want to pull up before we close down. I had this highlighted. The great paradox is this: we're all humans who crave belonging and acceptance badly, but applaud those who don't seem to care about it. We love and appreciate awkwardness when we see it in others, yet we still fight it in ourselves. Living in this tension is a huge key to learning how to use awkwardness as a valuable tool for success. So there's this difference between, we touched on a little bit already, but I want to hammer it home as we close down, between we love when everybody else is vulnerable, awkward, put themselves out there,
Yeah.
but we can't imagine putting ourselves in that situation. So there's this gap between, I want to be this person. I think it's great that Brené's doing this, Lady Gaga's doing this, but I can't imagine doing this. Talk to me about that quote. It's so powerful.
Yeah, that's the great paradox of awkwardness, is that when we see someone else embrace theirs with both arms, we're like, that person is the best, right? Where they just own it. They just love it. I love that person. And yet when we start to experience that in our own bodies, our instinct is to shut it down. Yes. Our instinct is to run away from it. Our instinct is we should eliminate it. And so it's really bridging that tension and understanding that that thing that we love and appreciate in other people, people will love and appreciate in us if we don't let it consume us, if we actually let it out, if we name it, if we, share our stories with other people. One of the exercises I talk about in the book is, especially in team environments, whether it's professional, sports, whatever, make space for your cracked egg stories or your blunders, right? Make space at the beginning of a conversation. All right, 5 minutes at the top of the meeting. What are some things that went south, right? What are some screw ups that you had this week? What's something that did not go as planned? When we actually create space for those stories, there's actually research that says that everything that follows is more generative, we're more creative, we're more innovative. There are numerous benefits to this, amongst those benefits being the normalization of it. You use that word once or twice, right? We normalize the emotion because when we're in those moments, we think it's just us. People are going to think we're foolish for this. Actually, no. Think about the way you look at other people, how you appreciate it in other people. The more we have this conversation, the more we talk about it, the more we can embrace it as everyone's experience, not just the confident people, the not confident people. It's everyone's experience.
That's phenomenal. Henna, I like to close down my podcast with asking an advice question. So I like to end with something applicable for people. This has been so great. You've given so many nuggets. Sometimes we just got to keep it simple with one thing. So for the listeners out there, Henna, what's one thing that they can do if they're thinking, man, this is me. I am awkward. I want to work on my awkwardness. In addition to buying the book, what's one action item they could do to become a little bit less awkward or improve on their awkwardness? What's one thing?
Sure. My one, just if you can try one teeny actionable action step this week, it will be next time you find yourself in an awkward interaction, awkward situation, name it. Name it immediately. Just be the first one into the room, go, woo, that was a cringe, or man, this feels awkward. name it, and watch what happens. Not just to you, but to every other person in that room. Watch the immediate effect. And the more you can build that muscle, the more you're going to see the power it has when you reclaim it. But this week, you're going to find yourself in an awkward situation. I know you'll find one. Name it right away, and then send me a message and let me know what happens.
Love it. The book, Good Awkward, How to Embrace the Embarrassing and Celebrate the Cringe to Become the Bravest You. I've read it. It's so well done. By the way, Henna, just very not just professional, but well written and well organized, flows really well. Congrats to you on your success on that. Where can my listeners buy the book, and how can they support you on your next endeavor?
Well, thank you so much. The book is everywhere where books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, if you prefer to shop indie. Goodawkward.com has some more details on the book. And as far as connecting, I'm Henna Pryor on all socials. I will say LinkedIn is my favorite playground, but LinkedIn and Instagram, just at Henna Pryor. I'm always open to new social friendships. So please link up with me there. And yeah, I hope that the book was a passion. But more than anything, I'm so proud that it's just not another book on getting comfortable being uncomfortable. If awkwardness has ever felt like something that's played a role in your life, I promise not only will you learn something, I hope that maybe you laugh a couple times too, and would be so grateful for the support.
Henna, you're awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.